Russian tanks are not obsolete. They are not weak. They are not outdated museum pieces rolling into battle by mistake. On paper, they still have everything tanks are supposed to have. Heavy armor, large guns, the ability to field armor at scale. Decades of doctrine built around breakthrough, pressure, and momentum. And yet, across Ukraine, the same thing keeps happening. Russian armor moves forward, confident in numbers, confident in protection, confident in experience. And then the advance stops. Not after a major battle, not after hours of fighting, sometimes not even after a visible engagement, just a sudden loss of momentum. Columns slow, vehicles halt, crews dismount, orders hesitate, the push dissolves into confusion long before a breakthrough ever becomes possible. This is not because Russian tanks suddenly stopped working. It is because the battlefield has increasingly stopped allowing tanks to do what they were designed to do. There is one condition modern tanks depend on more than armor, firepower, or numbers, and Russian tanks still struggle with it. Persistent visibility. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why this one condition kills armor in 3 steps, and why the moment tempo dies, the fight changes permanently. In many parts of Ukraine, tanks are rarely unobserved for long. Not when moving, not when waiting, not when repositioning, sometimes not even when sitting still with engines off. Small drones and modern sensors can make the battlefield feel continuously watched, especially along repeated routes and key approaches. A tank no longer enters a fight when it fires its first shot. It can enter the fight the moment it is detected. And detection often happens first. This changes everything. Historically, tanks were designed for a world where exposure was temporary. A tank moved, fired, repositioned, and disappeared again. Surprise was assumed. Maneuver was expected. Observation was limited by distance, terrain, and human eyesight. That world is fading. In Ukraine, surveillance can be persistent. Once a tank is seen, it can be logged, tracked, and remembered. Even if nothing happens immediately, the clock can start. Because once a tank is visible, every advantage it was designed to exploit begins to erode. Speed becomes predictable. Armor becomes a known target. Mass becomes congestion. Movement becomes risk. This is why Russian tanks are not always failing dramatically. They can fail quietly, not only in explosive defeats, but in stalled advances, in pressure that never builds, in operations that run out of time before they run out of vehicles. This is also why adding more tanks does not automatically fix the problem. More tanks do not create surprise. They can create more signatures, more heat, more noise, more movement patterns for drones to follow, more targets packed onto the same roads and routes. Visibility can scale faster than protection. That is the core imbalance Russian armor keeps running into. You can armor against a weapon. You cannot armor against being watched. And the most dangerous part is what happens next. Once a tank is visible, it may no longer control the tempo of the fight. The defender can. The defender can choose when to engage, where to engage, and whether to engage at all. The tank becomes reactive. It moves because it has been spotted. It stops because it might be targeted. It fires because time feels compressed. Every decision becomes rushed. This is the moment where tanks stop behaving like breakthrough weapons and start behaving like liabilities. And this is why Russian armor can struggle even when it outnumbers the defender. Because modern armored warfare is no longer only about who has more tanks. It is about who controls information first. In Ukraine, the side that sees first does not just shoot first. It can decide whether the fight happens at all. And that single shift explains more stalled offensives and failed breakthroughs than any single wonder weapon ever could. In the next part, we need to understand why this problem hits Russian armor harder than most. Because this is not just a technology issue, it is a doctrinal one. And once doctrine lags behind the battlefield, even powerful machines start losing fights they were never meant to lose. Persistent visibility is a problem for every modern army, but it can hurt Russian armor more than most. And the reason has very little to do with tank models or individual crews. It has to do with how Russian armor doctrine was built to function. For decades, Russian and Soviet armored thinking assumed something essential would exist at the start of an operation. A window of uncertainty, a period where the attacker moves faster than the defender can see clearly, decide clearly, and respond coherently. That window was never supposed to last forever, but it was supposed to last long enough to cross open ground, long enough to seize key terrain, long enough to force the defender into reaction rather than choice. Russian armor was designed to exploit that window aggressively. Massed movement, rapid advance, pressure that compounds faster than coordination. The problem is that window has narrowed in many areas. In Ukraine, Russian tanks often move into observation, not uncertainty. Drones do not need to follow every vehicle continuously. They only need to identify patterns, routes, assembly areas, likely axes of advance. Once those are known, armor stops being unpredictable. And unpredictability was always part of what made classic armored tempo work. Without it, the structure becomes fragile. Russian tank formations are still often organized to move in columns, to advance along roads, to concentrate force rather than disperse it. That made sense when reconnaissance was limited and when mass itself created shock. In a drone-saturated battlefield, those same habits can become liabilities. Columns are easier to track. Roads are easier to watch. Repeated routes become obvious within days. Once a pattern is identified, Ukrainian forces do not need to contest the advance everywhere. They only need to contest it at the right moment, and that moment is chosen deliberately. This is where persistent visibility becomes lethal. Russian armor is not being destroyed because it is weak. It can be destroyed because it is seen early enough for defenders to prepare calm, controlled responses. Ambushes can be set before the first vehicle arrives. Artillery can be pre-registered. Drones can already be overhead. Escape routes can be planned. By the time the first tank appears, the odds can already be tilted. Russian doctrine struggles here because it expects friction to slow the defender more than the attacker. It expects confusion to favor momentum. In Ukraine, confusion can favor the side that is not moving. This is why Russian tanks often appear to hesitate after initial contact, not because crews lack courage, but because the doctrinal playbook offers few good options once surprise is lost. Push forward and risk driving deeper into a prepared kill zone. Reverse under observation and expose rear vehicles. Dismount infantry into open ground under drones. Pause and wait while being tracked. None of these are good choices, and persistent visibility removes the one-choice doctrine relied on most. Move fast before the defender fully understands what is happening. That understanding can arrive first now. This is also why Russian attempts to adapt can lag behind reality. You see add-ons on tanks, sometimes described as cope cages and sometimes nicknamed turtle tanks online. These are meant to reduce some drone threats, but analysts have noted they can also reduce visibility and mobility, even when they offer limited protection in some cases. You see electronic warfare, you see smoke, you see changes, but many of these address symptoms, not the core problem. The core problem is informational. Russian armored units can move as if reconnaissance is something that happens before the operation, not during it. They advance assuming the picture is mostly accurate, when in reality it is already aging. Ukrainian forces assume the opposite. They assume the picture is always incomplete, and they update it constantly. That difference matters more than armor thickness. Persistent visibility also shifts who bears psychological pressure. Traditionally, the defender feared the tank. In Ukraine, tank crews increasingly fear the unseen observer, the drone they cannot hear, the camera that does not blink, the knowledge that even stopping might not break contact. That fear does not paralyze instantly. It erodes momentum slowly. Columns compress, spacing tightens, orders slow, initiative drains away without a single decisive moment. This is how armored offensives can die now. Not only in fireballs, but in minutes lost, in caution replacing aggression, in commanders realizing the advance no longer feels controllable. And this is why Russian armor can struggle even when it technically retains the ability to push forward. It is not only losing fights, it is losing timing. In the next part, we need to look at the battlefield itself. because persistent visibility alone does not stop tanks. It becomes truly dangerous when it combines with terrain, drones, and precision fires into something far more efficient. That is where Russian armor walks into the trap. Persistent visibility becomes truly dangerous when it fuses with terrain. On its own, a drone is just an observer. On its own, terrain is just geography. Together, they become a weapon system. This is where Russian tanks run into the problem they still cannot solve. Most fighting in Ukraine does not happen on open maneuver ground. It happens along roads, village edges, tree lines, drainage ditches, and rolling fields broken by cover every few hundred meters. This terrain forces armor to move in predictable ways even when commanders want flexibility. Drones exploit that predictability. From the air, terrain stops being concealment and starts becoming a map of constraints. Roads become channels, tree lines become markers, villages become choke points, fields become danger zones once tracks appear. Ukrainian drone operators do not need to follow tanks continuously. They only need to understand where tanks must go. Once that understanding exists, terrain stops favoring the attacker. Russian armor is designed to fight through resistance. It is far less comfortable fighting inside a space where every movement option is already known to the defender. This is how drones turn neutral ground into a trap. A road watched by a drone is no longer just a road. It is a timeline. The moment a column appears, defenders can estimate how long it will take to reach each point, where it can stop, where it cannot turn, where it must slow. That allows Ukrainian forces to plan engagements calmly. They do not rush to respond. They do not need to improvise. They let the terrain do most of the work. This is why so many armored losses occur at village entrances, road bends, bridge approaches, and narrow corridors. These are not random. They are points where terrain limits options. Once a tank enters those spaces under observation, its choices shrink dramatically. Russian armor often attempts to compensate with speed. Move faster, push through, keep momentum. But speed does not defeat visibility. It can amplify it. A fast-moving column can be easier to track than a slow one. Dust plumes, heat signatures, and movement patterns become more obvious. And once terrain forces a slowdown, speed disappears instantly. This is where drones transform from observers into enablers. They cue artillery, they guide FPV drones, they inform tank ambushes, they confirm damage and adjust follow-on fires. The kill does not come from the drone itself most of the time. It comes from everything that responds because the drone never loses sight. Russian armor struggles here because its doctrine was built for a world where terrain could hide movement long enough to matter. In Ukraine, terrain can delay movement but not reliably hide it. Tree lines that once offered concealment now mark routes of advance. Villages that once provided cover now restrict maneuver under observation. Even smoke can lose effectiveness when drones simply wait for it to clear. This leads to a dangerous feedback loop. As Russian tanks encounter repeated ambushes in constrained terrain, commanders grow more cautious. They slow down, they bunch up, they rely more heavily on roads and cleared paths. That caution makes them even more predictable. Ukrainian forces do not need to contest every movement. They wait for the moment when terrain and visibility overlap perfectly. That moment is usually brief, sometimes only seconds, but that is all it takes. A tank fires from concealment. An FPV drone hits a lead vehicle. Artillery lands behind the column. The terrain closes. The column freezes. This is why Russian armor so often appears to stall rather than collapse. The vehicles may still be operational. Crews may still be alive, but movement stops. And in modern warfare, a stopped force can become a defeated force because once stopped, it remains visible. Once visible, it remains targetable. Once targetable, it bleeds. This is not about poor courage or outdated tanks. It is about fighting inside an environment where every physical constraint is now paired with constant observation. Russian tanks were designed to dominate terrain through force. They are now being defeated by terrain through information. And that leads directly to the final problem Russian armor still cannot handle. Not drones, not terrain, but what happens when those two strip away the ability to recover momentum. Here is the point where everything converges. Drones remove surprise, terrain removes freedom, and tempo is what dies first. For Russian armor, losing tempo is not just a setback. It can be the beginning of the end of an operation. Tempo is the ability to decide what happens next. To move faster than the opponent can observe, react, and coordinate. Russian armor doctrine has always relied on tempo to compensate for losses, push forward, keep pressure, force the defender to respond instead of think. That logic collapses once movement is continuously observed. The moment a column is spotted by drones, tempo begins leaking away. Every decision after that can become reactive. Crews are no longer choosing routes. They are responding to threats. Commanders are no longer shaping the battlefield. They are trying to keep units alive. This is where Russian tanks face the one problem they still cannot solve: recovery. In earlier wars, losing momentum did not necessarily mean failure. Units could regroup out of sight, reorganize, reroute, rebuild pressure elsewhere. In Ukraine, that recovery phase can be visible. A halted column does not reliably disappear. It can sit under observation. Even if no immediate strike follows, the threat remains. Drones watch for movement. Artillery waits for coordination. FPV teams look for openings. The tank crews know this. Once stopped, every attempt to move again can feel dangerous. Engines restart under eyes in the sky. Turrets traverse while someone is watching. Even reversing becomes a risk because the act itself signals intent. This can create paralysis, not panic, not collapse. Paralysis. Russian armor can end up doing nothing for long periods, not advancing, not retreating, just existing in place while pressure accumulates. That is deadly in modern war. Tempo loss also breaks command and control. Orders arrive late because commanders are reacting to footage rather than shaping action. Communication overload sets in. Everyone is reporting threats. No one is confident enough to push forward without certainty, and certainty no longer exists. This is where the psychological cost becomes operational. Tank crews who expect ambushes behave differently. They slow down, they space poorly, they cluster near cover, they hesitate at intersections. Every pause invites another drone pass. Momentum disappears quietly. Ukraine does not need to destroy every tank to win these exchanges. It only needs to ensure that Russian armor never regains initiative. A force that cannot move forward is no longer offensive. A force that cannot withdraw cleanly is no longer flexible. A force that cannot disappear is no longer survivable. This is why so many engagements end not with dramatic explosions, but with abandoned vehicles, delayed assaults, and stalled advances that never resume. Russian tanks are not being defeated only in single decisive moments. They are being worn down by a system that denies recovery. So now we can finally say it clearly. The one thing Russian tanks still cannot handle is not a missile. It is not a drone. It is not a Western tank. It is exposure without escape.